This is one of my all-time favorite Old Testament stories. One of my all-time. In fact, I come back to this story every Thanksgiving week. You'll hear me share this story again at other times. It's one of my all-time favorite stories, and you're going to wonder why. You're going to wonder why. But hang in there with me, and I think you'll see. It's found in 2 Kings chapters 6 and 7. Let me read you the story, and then we'll break it down. Now it came about after this that Ben-Hadad, the king of Aram, one of the enemy kings of the Israelites, gathered all his army and went up and besieged Samaria. They surrounded it, cut off all sources of supply in order literally to starve the people out of the city. So there was a severe famine and salmon. There was a severe famine in Samaria, and behold, they kept besieging it until a donkey's head was sold for 80 shekels of silver, and a fourth of a cab of dove's dung, that's a quarter quart, sold for 5 shekels of silver. Donkey head, $1,600. Dove's dung, $100. And you think eggs and milk are expensive today. And as the king of Israel, King Jeroboam, was passing by on the well, a woman cried out to him, saying, "Help my lord the king." But the king said, now you'll see the sarcasm here. His sarcasm comes from hopelessness. The king says, "If the Lord does not help you, from where am I to help you? From the threshing floor or from the wine press? There's no wine, there's no wheat." And he's saying to the lady, the king is saying, "What do you want me to do?" Then the king said to her, "What is the matter with you?" Now this gets a little gross. Children, cover your ears. And she said, "This woman said to me, 'Give your son so that we may eat him today, and we will eat my son tomorrow.' So we cooked my son and ate him. And I said to her on the next day, 'Give me your son so that we may eat him,' but she has hidden her son." Lord, have mercy. Does it get any worse than this? This is a level of peril and darkness and desperation that is actually indescribable. You couldn't make this up, because if you made this story up, people would say, "You are a sick, sick person." Side note here, Elisha is the prophet during this time. He was a prophet for 6 decades in the century of 800 BC. And King Jeroboam, the king of Israel, is a wicked king. And this siege happened because he did not take Elisha's wisdom and advice to intercept Ben-Hadad, the king of Aram, and his army before they got to Samaria. The king was too obsessed with his power and his own lusts and his greediness, and he shunned Elisha and God's wisdom about this siege. It could have been stopped. This famine did not have to happen. Now, this horrible thing has happened, and what does the king do? But he blames Elisha. And he goes to kill Elisha to get rid of any evidence that he was negligent, but Elisha's men protect him. And then when there is no hope, when things are the darkest, when moms are eating their children, Elisha says, "Listen to the word of the Lord. This time tomorrow, a measure of fine flour will be sold for a shekel, and 2 measures of barley for a shekel at the gate of Samaria." The royal officer on whose hand the king was leaning responded to Elisha and said, "Even if the Lord were to make windows in heaven, could this happen? Could this thing happen? How could a famine be over in just 24 hours? Let me ask a question before we go on. Have you ever been in such a dark situation that you think, is it ever going to get better? Can it get better? Human beings, we get to those places sometimes. Is it ever going to get better? Then right in the middle of this mess, this disaster at the city walls, there are 4 characters who are my 4 favorite characters in this story. They come into the story, and this is why I love this story and why we have so much to learn from this story. These 4 characters are why this is my favorite Thanksgiving story. Now there were 4 leprous men at the entrance of the gate, and they said to one another, "Why are we sitting here until we die?" Great question. Why are we starving to death? If we say we will enter the city, then the famine is in the city and we will die there. But if we sit here, we will also die. Now then, come and let's go over to the camp of the Arameans. That's the enemy that has besieged the city. And then I love this line. If they spare us, we will live, and if they kill us, then we will die. I love this. They're thinking, we're going to die in the city. No, we're going to die on the wall. No, we're going to die outside the city. No, and we will probably die if we go to the camp of the Arameans, but we have nothing to lose. For if they kill us, then we will die. I don't know. I get a kick out of that line. I just do. So they got up at twilight, go to the camp of the Arameans. When they came to the outskirts of the camp, behold, there was no one there. For the Lord made the army of the Arameans hear a sound of chariots, a sound of horses, the sound of a great army, and they said to one another, behold, the king of Israel has hired the king of the Hittites and the kings of the Egyptians against us to attack us. So they got up and fled at twilight, abandoned their tents, their horses, and their donkeys, indeed the camp itself, just as it was, and they fled for their lives. And when these men with leprosy, these 4 guys, came to the outskirts of the camp, they entered one tent and ate and drank and carried from their silver, gold, and clothes, and they went and hid them. Then they returned and entered another tent and carried valuables from there also and went on and hid them. They're just stockpiling this stuff. It's party time, friends. There's 4 of them and a whole enemy camp that's been abandoned. Their gamble has paid off. If they kill us, we will die. But no, we shall live. And we will party like it's 899 BC. And then all of a sudden, this may be the best part of the story. They said to one another, what are we doing is not right. What we are doing is not right. The day is a day of good news, but we are keeping silent about it. Now then come, let's go and inform the king's household. So the lepers go back and they tell the king, but the king is so paranoid he thinks it's a trap. But then he's convinced by a few of his men to send out a search committee to see if the lepers are saying what they are saying is true. And behold, all the way was full of clothes and equipment which the Arameans had thrown away when they fled in a hurry. Then the messengers returned and informed the king, so the people went out and plundered the camp of the Arameans. And then a measure of fine flour was sold for a shekel, and 2 measures of barley for a shekel. 24 hours later, just like Elisha said, the famine is over. They have food. They have plenty, abundance. Isn't that a great story? It's a great story. It's a little gross in the middle there, but it's a great story, and it has a great ending, and there's much to learn from this. This is why it's one of my favorite stories in the Bible. 3 things, and I want us to think about it as we head into the Thanksgiving week. 3 things that motivate me by these 4 lepers. 3 things these lepers show us, teach us, elaborate. 3 things. They're simple, but they're profound. Number 1 is, you notice, they go for broke. They go for broke. If we stay here, we will die. If we go there, we will die. If they kill us, we will die. It's like the scene from The 3 Amigos. I get a kick out of it. I'm sorry. I won't say it anymore. They go for broke. They go for broke. Everybody say, they go for broke. I have found nothing of great significance happens in our lives until we are fully committed, until we are fully in. As psychologist Neil Strauss says, without deep commitment, you cannot have depth in anything, whether it's a relationship, business, or a hobby. And we live in a culture where we dabble. We dabble with commitments. We dabble with our faith. We dabble with our goals. As long as the lepers keep sitting on the fence, nothing good is going to happen. They're just going to die sitting on the fence. So they decide to go for broke. Do you know when we tend to go for broke? It's when we experience enough pain, enough desperateness, where we finally get to a place where we say, I can't sit on the fence anymore. It happens when we spend some time reflecting about the meaning of life. I'm not going to be around forever, and the $64,000 question with inflation today, it's over $100,000. But the question at the end of our lives are, what will I have to show for my one and only life? I mean, just the typical stuff, a house, a picket fence, a closet full of outdated clothes from the 70s, a small portfolio to pass on to the kids. Now, there's nothing wrong with those things, but is that it? Or will there be some example of dad or mom or grandpa or grandma going for broke, and it left a legacy in their family? Dad had an anger problem, and he went for broke, got off the fence, humbled himself, and got help, and it impacted our family. Grandpa drank so much that he neglected Grandma and his family, but he went for broke, got off the fence, got help, and it changed the legacy of our family for generations. Mom suffered some deep darkness. She went for broke, got some help, got off the fence, and now our family is not afraid to talk about mental health. Dad was successful in business, but decided to get off the fence of his faith, and he went for broke and used his financial and business savvy to impact the less fortunate, and he left an enduring legacy and example of caring for the poor for generations to come. Friends, let me just say it again. Nothing of great significance happens until we're fully committed, fully in. Jesus said it this way: no procrastination, no backward looks. You can't put God's kingdom off till tomorrow. Seize the day, for this day is the only day that we have. Translated, go for broke. So here's my question on this first part. What area in your life are you maybe on the fence and God is nudging you, he's beckoning you to go for broke? What area in your life? It's maybe different, but you've been on the fence and you know it's time to go for broke. As St. Francis of Assisi said, preach always, go for broke, be fully in, and if you must, use words. May of 2020, our leadership team had been meeting, dreaming, talking about what a safe, simple, servant-focused church could look like, and we were in the middle of a pandemic. What a church might be that would preach always and sometimes use words. But there came a point when we couldn't keep having meetings and keep pontificating about it. So June 7th, 2020, we went for broke, all in, and I gave my first message at Almond Park in Orangeville, California. And for the last 4.5 years, God has blessed us and has used us to bless others. And in the words of Karen Carpenter's, we've only just begun. But nothing would have happened if a few people wouldn't have given each other the courage to go for broke. See, I think it's significant that there's 4 lepers and not 1. Because sometimes we need people around us to give us the courage to go for broke. 4 lepers, 4 outcasts, 4 nobodies look at each other and say, what do we have to lose? They give each other courage, go for broke, and it not only changes their lives, but it changes a nation that has deemed them untouchable. I'll ask it one more time, we'll move on. What area in your life are you maybe on the fence and God is calling you, go for broke? So they go for broke. Number 2, they go for broke and then they drink in their good fortune. They just drink in their good fortune. They go for broke and they stumble into this bounty and it's party time. Party time. Why are you laughing? Is there something? No. Don't put that up. You ruin the punchline. I'm going to give the punchline anyway. So picture these guys from tent to tent to tent, drinking and eating. It's heaven. 4 guys. There's food plenty. And again, what I was going to say was, the closest way I can relate to this is when we were kids, there was 4 of us and my mom and dad. My dad would take us to Oki Frioli. Don't put it up yet. You see where you're, okay. My dad would take us to Oki Frioli on Marconi Avenue in Sacramento. Is anybody familiar with Oki Frioli? It was all you could eat Mexican food, burritos, tacos, churros, enchiladas, tamales, carne asada, quesadillas, fajitas, carnitas, churros, chili rellenos, chili verde, chimichangas. And he didn't take us there because of the quality of the food. And he didn't take us there because of the health or the taste of the food. He took us there, now the picture, he took us there because of this. $1.25. I mean, that's cheap. And then it went to $1.50 and we had to start looking for another buffet. But you could eat all the bounty of food you wanted. And at the end of the buffet, there was an all-you-could-eat ice cream. Yeah. So we ate and we drank in our bounty till we could not eat or drink no more. This is what the lepers are doing. Just picture this. The lepers are eating and drinking in their good fortune. And I have noticed the most effective people of faith, ambassadors of love, are people, and I want to put this on the screen. The most effective people of faith, ambassadors of love, have given themselves permission to drink in the bounty of the goodness and the grace of God. I've just noticed this. Friends, those of us who've been saved by grace, by the work of the cross, should be the most grateful, thankful, overwhelmed people, not just at Thanksgiving, but every day, all year round. Can I get an amen? You show me someone who has availed himself or herself fully, they've gone for broke, and in the saving grace of God, the bounty of his forgiveness, the bounty of his blessings, the bounty of his mercy. You show me someone who drinks in their blessings fully, regularly, extravagantly, and I'll show you someone who is spilling over with joy and gratitude, and these kinds of people are attractive. People are drawn to them. People find God's hope through them. Especially people who don't know about God's hope. Their lives preach always, and many times they don't even have to use words. On the other hand, you show me a Christian who's locked up in legalism, burdened by ritualism, suckered into scarcity thinking, into score-keeping, performance-oriented religion, someone who takes for granted the bounty God has given them, and I'll show you someone who isn't attractive at all, especially to people who don't know about God's hope. Their lives preach always. They're just preaching the wrong thing. Sometimes, let's just stay here for a second. Sometimes Christians, the longer they walk with God, the crankier they get, the more ornery, the more judgmental, and it can get ugly, and it's not supposed to be this way. You see, Paul, the Apostle Paul, said this. He said, though outwardly we are wasting away. He's just being honest. Physically, we grow up and we get old, and we're anybody here this week wake up a little sore, muscles a little achy, bones a little creaky, right? When I was a youth pastor, we used to do top 10 lists because I love David Letterman. So let me give you a top 10 games we play when we get older, all right? Top 10 games we play when we get older. 10, musical recliners. 9, spin the bottle of Mylanta. 8, hide and go pee. I'm sorry, I had to go there. 7, Simon says something incoherent. 6, Doc Goose. All right, this isn't my list, all right? Top 10 games we play when we get older. 5, Red Rover, the nurse says bend over. 4, kick the bucket. Nah, it's not very nice. 3, 20 questions shouted in your good ear. 2, pin the toupee on the bald guy. And the number 1 top 10 game we play when we get older, SAG, you're it. All right, just a little, yeah, thank you. I didn't write that, okay? I found that on a thing called the internets somewhere out there. But so let's go back. Paul said, though outwardly we are wasting away, physically this is what happens, right? But then he says this beautiful thing about those who've experienced the cross and the grace of Christ. He says, yet inwardly, we're being renewed day by day. What's Paul saying? Paul's saying what should happen in our spiritual life. He's saying each successive year as we drink in the bounty of God's blessings, of God's mercy, of his faithfulness, of his forgiveness, our hearts ought to break a little more for those who do not know these things. Each successive year, our hearts ought to yearn for those who've been forgotten or marginalized. Each successive year, my heart ought to become more compassionate and tender towards God and towards people. Each successive year, my heart ought to become more and more aware and overwhelmed by the endless bounty of the grace he offers me day after day after day. Every morning, his mercies are new. And it should just overwhelm me. My body grows weak, my spirit expands. Just like those lepers who drink in their good fortune, who didn't deserve any of it, but they drank it in. That's how we are to live. We didn't do anything to receive God's grace except just accept it. As John Maxwell said, I love this, he says, the instant we are born, we already owe someone for 9 months of room and board. And we never really pay that back. And all the moms say amen to that. I love what David says. He says, what will I give to the Lord in return for all his benefits towards me? How can I repay him for his precious blessings? I will lift up my cup of salvation. And call on the name of the Lord, and I will pay my vows to the Lord. Yes, in the presence of all his people. Gratefulness for the bounty of God, God's bounty. It's not being in denial that life is difficult. We've experienced loss this week, missing our dear Vanessa, who is with the Lord. We experience loss and pain and hurt, but at the same time, we have so much to be grateful for. If we wait to be grateful until everything is perfect, then we will never be grateful. You think about the lepers who saved a nation. They're celebrating their bounty, but they still have leprosy. They're still outcasts, but they could not, this is a double negative, they couldn't not celebrate the goodness that was bestowed upon them. They just took the time. Let me ask this question before we move on. How are you doing on celebrating your bounty? Even though physically we grow weak, are you being renewed day by day? Renewed by God's goodness. So this Thanksgiving, I'm going to give you something to do. I want to give you 4 things to do. Number 1, this Thanksgiving, sing, not because all is good or all is secure or all is well. Sing because God has promised to never leave us or forsake us. This Thanksgiving, dance, not because you know the rhythm or you know the move or you understand the groove. Dance because your soul is moved and you feel his grace and you feel the fire of God's Spirit. This Thanksgiving, cry. Not because you're weak or stained or have lost all hope. Cry because joy comes in the morning. And this Thanksgiving, laugh. Laugh, not because life is always funny or the sky is always sunny. Laugh because it's free medicine, it brings healing, and God's bounty is available fresh and new every morning. As Eckhart Tolle says, acknowledging the good that you already have in your life is the foundation for all abundance. Like the old song says, when upon life's billows you are tempest tossed, when you are discouraged, thinking all is lost, count your many blessings. Name them one by one. Count your many blessings and see what God has done. Okay, last observation before communion. Last observation. When the lepers go for broke, and this completes the story. The story wouldn't really be that impacting without this last thing. When the lepers go for broke and they're drinking in all their good fortune, they realize they're just like a 5 iron away from where people are dying and eating their children and selling awful food for exorbitant prices. And it hits them like a ton of bricks. And then they say this. They say, how can we be enjoying all this and not share it with others? The last thought here is they share their bounty with others. They don't keep it to themselves. It's simple, but it's profound. Billy Graham said, we are not cisterns made for hoarding. We are channels made for sharing. And let me just say this. We know this, but it's just a reminder as we go in to this holiday week. Something supernatural happens when we go for broke, drink in our good fortune, and share our undeserved bounty with others. I see it around here all the time. It's a beautiful thing. There's a man who crashes his plane in the desert, and he's crawling through the desert. He's about ready to die when a man comes up selling neckties. He says, sir, can I sell you a necktie? They're really nice. And the man says, are you crazy? I'm dying of thirst. What good will a necktie do? The tie salesman leaves, and the man continues to crawl, and he comes upon an unbelievable sight, an oasis with a restaurant in the middle. He crawls up and begs the doorman, please give me something to drink. And the doorman says, I'm sorry, but gentlemen are not admitted without a tie. I have a friend. Don't hand out the communion yet, though. Okay. I have a friend. His son was going to school on the East Coast. His son was trying to figure out life. This is a true story. It's in the 1990s. He's far from God, but he tells his dad he's going to try church one more time. His son walks up to the front of the church, and the usher says, men are not allowed in the church without a tie on. This was 1995, not 1895. And his son never went back to church again. There was a car parked illegally near Skid Row in Los Angeles, and each day a police officer would put a parking ticket under the windshield wiper. There were 6 tickets piled up under the windshield when they discovered a dead woman in the driver's seat of the car. Friends, I'd like to declare today, this woman didn't need another citation under her windshield. She needed to be revived and saved. Friends, my friend's son did not need an appropriate dress code. He needed to hear about God's grace and see people celebrating God's grace. Friends, this world does not need more rules, rituals, or citations or dress codes. Friends, those lepers, we have been given God's bounty of salvation. That should make you smile right now. And we can't keep it to ourselves. We're not called to be a holy huddle. There's homes going in all around here. And I just wonder, not people who already go to church, but are there people who don't know about the hope of salvation and the hope of God's bounty? We're not called to be a holy huddle, but we're called to share our bounty with a world who is experiencing a famine where people are dying for lack of love and hope. And so this is why I love this story. It challenges me. I've been thinking, I like these three things. I want to follow the example of Jesus in these three things. Jesus, who didn't come to give more citations or rules or what to wear at the temple. He looked right into the hearts of desperate people whose souls were starving in the midst of spiritual famine, and he gave them a bounty of forgiveness and grace. And I pray, like so many of you do, that we would go for broke this year. We would just continue as our hearts expand, that we would go for broke. No more fence riding, and I don't know what that means for you, but you probably do. And that we would be overwhelmed by the bounty of God's blessings. Friends, we are blessed. And then to continue to share out of the abundance of our lives, our blessings to those who need it. Amen.